Well, good. What is this? Monday. Isn't it hard to kind of just figure out what day it is these days? I mean, it's like, is it Monday? Is it Tuesday? It is Monday today, the 20th, and this is a big day. I got news for you. Okay, so it's a big day. You know, I'm already one grandpa. I'm going to be grandpa times two in just minutes. My daughter is currently in labor, and we've got a little girl coming. Her name is Harper, and so far things are going well. And so my hope and prayer is that that continues. But anyway, while we're waiting, I thought, all right, I'm going to get some things done in the classroom, do some organizing, and then I thought, hey, wait a second, I've got some James and the Giant Peach to do. So anyway, let's go ahead and get back to this. As you can tell, it's a rainy day today. I don't know when you see this video, if it's today or if it's, some other time. I got to straighten this camera out. It's driving me crazy. Let me try to fix this here. Oh, that didn't help. All right, come on. We're going to get this. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's better. Anyway, all right. So, it's raining out there today. So it's a nice day to just stay inside, enjoy a good book. And we've got a good book right here in James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. All right, here we go. We left off on chapter 16. Anne Sponge and Anne Spiker are no more. They were rolled as flat as I don't know, kind of reminds me of those old cartoons where it was like Tom and Jerry stuff where, they get, Tom gets like run over by a steamroller or something like that. And, somehow he's always back, the next episode or just like a second or two later after that scene. But I guess when you're a cartoon, those things can happen. But Anne Sponge and Anne Spiker are not cartoons, and they're gone. So James and his friends are on they're on their adventure. So let's take a look. Chapter 16, here we go. We're going to go through 16, 17, and 18 today. And now the peach had broken out of the garden and was over the edge of the hill, rolling and bouncing down the steep slope at a terrific pace. Faster and faster and faster it went, and the crowds of people were climbing up the hill suddenly caught sight of the terrible monster plunging down upon them, and they screamed and scattered to the right and left as it went hurling by. At the bottom of the hill, it charged across the road, knocking over a telegraph pole and flattening two parked automobiles as it went by. Then it rushed madly across the 20 fields, breaking down all the fences and the hedges in its path. It went right through the middle of the herd of fine Jersey cows, and then through a flock of sheep, and then through a paddock of horses, and then a yard full of pigs, and soon the whole countryside was a seething mass of panic-stricken animals stampeding in all directions. Now, I don't know if you guys are paying attention. I'm going to take a break here for a second because it's important to understand why authors do what they do. And you probably didn't pay attention to this because maybe you're reading along, maybe you have your own copy of this, maybe you're just listening, but if you listened or if you're following along, you'll notice there wasn't a break in that sentence. That was just a really, really long sentence, kind of with a bunch of commas saying this was happening and this was happening and this was happening. And there was a reason for that. Roald Dahl, when he put that in there, he wanted to express urgency and that these things were really happening and that this was an exciting moment. And so while I wouldn't necessarily always say that you want one sentence to go on and on and on and on like that, there was a reason for why he did what he did. And that was to give us this like almost this panicky feeling of what was going on. And so it kind of puts us there. And that's cool. Good authors do that. Okay, the peach was still going at a tremendous speed with no sign of it slowing down. And about a mile farther on, it came to a village. Down the main street of the village, it rolled with people leaping frantically out of its path, left and right. And at the end of the street, it went crashing right through the wall of an enormous building and out the other side, leaving two gaping round holes in the brickwork. The building happened to be the famous factory where they made chocolate. And almost at once, a great river of warm melted chocolate came pouring out of the holes in the factory walls. Now, Let's stop right there. What factory do you already know of? Now, this is a fictional factory, okay? So don't say Hershey's or don't say Ghirardelli or, Dove chocolate or something like that. This is really kind of technically, it's a chocolate factory that doesn't exist. You know what that could be? If you're thinking Willy Wonka, you're absolutely right, because if you know a little bit of literature by Roald Dahl, he also wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And so what we didn't know coming into this story is that this is happening in the same place where Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was set. And so the peach just rolled right through the factory. And so if you like chocolate, you're going to love this, okay? Although, there's an old saying, too much of a good thing, right? This might be too much of a good thing. So let's take a look. I'm going to go back a little bit. A great river of warm melted chocolate came pouring out of the holes in the factory wall. A minute later, this brown sticky mess was flowing through every street in the village, oozing under the doors of houses and into people's shops and gardens. Children were wading up into it to their knees, and some were even trying to swim in it. And all of them were sucking it into their mouths in great greedy gulps. Great greedy gulps. That's a great example of alliteration, right? Alliteration is when we have like words that follow one after another that have the same beginning sound. So great greedy gulps, and shrieking with joy. But the peach rushed on across the countryside, on and on and on, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Cowsheds, stables, pigsties, barns, bungalows, hayricks, anything that got into its way went toppling over like a ninepin. An old man sitting quietly beside the stream had his fishing pole whisked out of his hands and went dashing by as it went dashing by. And a woman called Daisy Entwistle was standing so close that as it passed by her, she had the skin taken off the tip of her nose. Would it ever stop? Why should it? A round object will always keep rolling as long as it is down on a downhill slope. And in this case, the land sloped downhill all the way until it reached the ocean. The same ocean which James had begged his aunts to visit the day before. Well, perhaps he was going to visit it now. The peach was rushing closer and closer to it every second, and closer also to the towering white cliffs that came first. The cliffs are the most famous in the whole of England, and they are hundreds of feet high. Below them, the sea is deep and cold and hungry. I like that sentence. Many ships have been swallowed up and lost on this part of the coast, and all of the men who were in them as well. The peach was now 100 yards away from the cliff, now 50, now 20, now 10, now 5, and when it reached the edge of the cliff, it seemed to leap up into the sky and hang there suspended for a few seconds, still turning over and over in the air. Then it began to fall. Down, 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 smack! It hit the water with a colossal splash and sank like a stone. There's a picture of that. Those cliffs actually do exist. Pretty cool, huh? But a few seconds later, it came up again, and this time it stayed, floating serenely upon the surface of the water. Chapter 17. At this moment, the scene inside the peach itself was one of indescribable chaos. James Henry Trotter was lying bruised and battered on the floor of the room amongst the tangled mess of a centipede and earthworm and spider and ladybug and glowworm and old green grasshopper. In the whole history of the world, no travelers had ever had a more terrible journey than these unfortunate creatures. It had started out well with much laughing and shouting, and for the first few seconds, the peach had begun to roll slowly forward. Nobody had minded being tumbled around a little, and then it went bump, and then the centipede had shouted, "That was Aunt Sponge!" And then bump again, "That was Aunt Spiker!" There had been a tremendous burst of cheering all around. But as soon as the peach rolled out of the garden, and began to go down the steep hill, rushing and plunging and bounding madly downward, then the whole thing became a nightmare. James found himself being flung up against the ceiling and then back onto the floor and then sideways against the wall, then up onto the ceiling again and up and down and back and forth and round, and it came, and at the same time, all the other creatures were flying through the air in every direction, and so were the chairs and the sofa, not to mention 42 boots belonging to the centipede. Everything, and all of them were being rattled around like peas inside an enormous rattle that was being rattled by a mad giant who refused to stop. To make it worse, something went wrong with the glowworm's lighting system, and the room was in pitch darkness. There were screams and yells and curses and cries of pain, and everything kept going round and around. And once James made a frantic grab at some thick bars sticking out of the wall, only to find that they were a couple of the centipede's legs. "Let go, you idiot!" shouted the centipede, kicking himself free, and James was promptly flung across the room into the old green grasshopper's lap. Twice he got tangled up in a mess in Miss Spider's legs, a horrid business. And towards the end, the poor earthworm, who was cracking himself like a whip every time he flew from the air from one side of the room to the other, coiled himself around James's body and in a panic refused to unwind. Oh, it was a frantic and terrible trip. But it was over now, and the room was suddenly very still and quiet. Everybody was beginning slowly and painfully to disentangle himself from everybody else. "Let's have some light," shouted the centipede. "Yes," they cried. "Light, give us some light." "I'm trying," answered the poor glowworm. "I'm doing my best. Please be patient." They all waited in silence. Then a faint greenish light began to glimmer out of the glowworm's tail, and this gradually became stronger and stronger until it was anyway enough to see by. "Some great journey," the centipede said, limping across the room. "I shall never be the same again," murmured the earthworm. "Nor I," the ladybug said. "It's taken years off of my life." "But my dear friends," cried old green grasshopper, trying to be cheerful, "we are there." "Where?" they asked. "Where? Where is there?" "I don't know," the old green grasshopper said, "but I'll bet it's somewhere good." "We are probably at the bottom of a coal mine," the earthworm said gloomily. "We certainly went down and down and down very suddenly at the very last minute. I felt it in my stomach. I still feel it." "Perhaps we are in the middle of a beautiful country full of song and music," the old green grasshopper said. "Or near the seashore," James said eagerly, with lots of other children down on the sand for me to play with. "Pardon me," murmured Ladybug, turning a trifle pale, "but I'm wondering, but am I wrong in thinking that we seem to be bobbing up and down?" "Bobbing up and down?" they cried. "What on earth do you mean?" "You're still giddy from the journey," the old green grasshopper told her. You'll get over it in a minute. Is everybody ready to go upstairs and take a look around?" Yes, they chorused. "Come on, let's go." "I refuse to show myself out of the doors on my bare feet," the centipede said. "I have to get my boots on again first." "For heaven's sake, let's not go through all that nonsense again," the earthworm said. "Let's all tend to the centipede and lend the centipede a hand and get it over with," the ladybug said. "Come on." So they all did, all except Miss Spider, who was set upon weaving a long rope ladder that would reach from the top of the from the floor up to the hole in the ceiling. The old green grasshopper had wisely said that he must not risk going outside of the entrance when they didn't know where they were, but they must first of all go up to the top of the peach and have a look around. So a half an hour later, when the rope ladder had been finished and hung, and all 42 boots had been laced nicely onto the centipede's 42nd foot, they were all ready to go out. Amidst mounting excitement, the shouts of "Here we go, boys, the promised land! I can't wait to see it!" The whole company climbed up the ladder, one by one disappeared into the dark, soggy tunnel in a ceiling that went steeply, almost vertically upward. Whew, what a chapter, huh? All right, boy, we got a lot that we need to read today, but that's okay. So 18 is kind of long, but we're going to get through it anyway. So here we go, chapter 18, and then we're done. A minute later, they were in the opening, standing at the very top of the peach near the stem, blinking their eyes in the strong sunlight and peering nervously around. What happened? Where are we? But this is impossible, unbelievable, terrible. I told you we were bobbing up and down, the ladybug said. We're in the middle of the sea, cried James. And indeed they were. A strong current and a high wind had carried the peach so quickly away from the shore that already the land was out of sight. And around them lay a vast black ocean, hung deep and hungry. Little waves were bibbling against the sides of the peach. But how did it happen? They cried. Where are the fields? Where are the woods? Where is England? Nobody, not even James, could understand how in the world a thing like this could have come about. Ladies and gentlemen, the old green grasshopper said, trying very hard to keep the fear and disappointment out of his voice, I'm afraid we have found ourselves in a rather awkward situation. Awkward, cried the earthworm. My old dear green grasshopper, we are finished. Every one of us is about to perish. I may be blind, you know, but that much I can see quite clearly. Off with my boots, shouted the centipede. I cannot swim with my boots on. I can't swim at all, cried the ladybug. Nor can I, said the glowworm. Nor can I, said Miss Spider. None of us three girls can swim a single stroke. But you won't have to swim, James said calmly. We are floating beautifully, and sooner or later a ship is bound to come along and pick us up. They all stared at him in amazement. You are quite sure? Are you quite sure that we are not sinking? The ladybug asked. Of course I am, James answered. Go and look for yourselves. They ran over to the side of the peach and peered down at the water below. The boy is quite right, the old green grasshopper said. We are floating beautifully. Now we must all sit down and keep perfectly calm. Everything will be all right in the end. What absolute nonsense, cried the earthworm. Nothing is ever all right in the end, and we'll let you know it. Poor earthworm, the ladybug said, whispering in James's ear. He loves to make everything into a disaster. He hates to be happy. He's only happy when he's gloomy. Isn't that odd? But then, I suppose just being an earthworm is enough to make a person pretty gloomy. Don't you agree? If this peach is not going to sink, the earthworm was saying, and if we are not going to be drowned, then every one of us is going to starve to death instead. Do you realize we haven't had a thing to eat since yesterday morning? By golly, he's right, cried the centipede. For once, earthworm is right. Of course I'm right, the earthworm said, and we're not likely to find anything around here either. We shall all get thinner and thinner and thirstier, and then we shall die a slow, grisly death from starvation. I'm dying already. I'm slowly shriveling up for want of food. Personally, I would rather drown. But goodness heavens, you must be blind, said James. You know very well that I'm blind, snapped the earthworm. You don't need to rub it in. I didn't mean that, James said quickly. I'm sorry, but can't you see that? See, shouted the poor earthworm. How can I see if I am blind? James took a deep, slow breath. Can't you realize, he said patiently, that we have enough food here to last us for weeks and weeks? Where? They said, where? Why, the peach, of course. Our whole ship is made of food. Jumpin' Jehoshaphat, they cried. We never thought of that. My dear James, said the old green grasshopper, laying a front leg affectionately on James's shoulder. I don't know what we would do without you. You're so clever. Ladies and gentlemen, we are saved again. Now, this is one of the things I love about, I'm gonna take a break. This is one of the things I love about this book, because James, he had such a miserable life. And he was always being ordered around what to do, and he didn't have any power whatsoever. And Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker made sure of that. They made sure they just, they took away all power, all feeling good about himself. But what you're going to find in this, and you already kind of see it, is that James is, while the other creatures that are on board with on the peach can sometimes be negative, especially the earthworm, James is always positive. He's always positive, he's always calm, and he's always a good leader. And these are great things for you guys to learn, that even though you're young, you can still be positive, you can still be calm, and you can still be a good leader. Okay, so cling on to those things that you pick up on from James. There's a lot to learn from that. Okay, I don't know where we were at, but anyway, we are most certainly not, said the earthworm. You must be crazy. You can't eat the ship. It's the only thing that's keeping us up. We shall starve if we don't, said the centipede. Or we shall be drowned if we do, cried the earthworm. Oh dear, the old green grasshopper, said the old green grasshopper. Now we're worse off than before. Couldn't we just eat a little bit of it? Asked Mrs. Spider. I'm so dreadfully hungry. You can eat all you want, James answered. It would take us weeks and weeks to make any sort of dent in this enormous peach. Surely you can see that. Good heavens, he's right again, cried the old green grasshopper, clapping his hands. It would take weeks and weeks. Of course it would. But let's not go on making a lot of holes all over the deck. I think we better simply scoop it out of that tunnel there, the one that we came in by. An excellent idea, said the ladybug. What are you looking so worried about, earthworm? Said the centipede asked. What's the problem? The problem is, the earthworm said, the problem is that there is no problem. Everyone burst out laughing. Cheer up, earthworm, they said. Come and eat. And they all went over to the tunnel entrance and began scooping out great chunks of juicy, golden-covered peach flesh. Oh, marvelous, said the centipede, stuffing it into his mouth. Delicious, said the green grasshopper. Just fabulous, said the glowworm. Oh my, said the ladybug primly. What a heavenly taste. She looked up at James and smiled, and James smiled back at her. They sat down on the deck together, both of them, chewing away happily. You know, James, the ladybug said, up until this moment, I have never in my life tasted anything except those tiny little green flies that live on rose bushes. They have a perfectly delightful flavor, but this peach is even better. Isn't it glorious? Miss Spider said, coming over to join them. Personally, I had always thought that a big, juicy, caught in the web blue bottle was the finest dinner in the world until I tasted this. What a flavor, the centipede cried. It's terrific. There's nothing like it. There never has been. And I should know because I personally have tasted all of the finest foods in the world. Whereupon the centipede, with his mouth full of peach and with juice running down all over his chin, suddenly burst into song. I've eaten many strange, scrumptious dishes over my time, like jellied gnats and dandy prats and earwigs cooked in slime, and mice with rice. They're really nice when roasted in their prime, but don't forget to sprinkle them with just a pinch of grime. I've eaten mud burgers by the greatest cooks there are, and scrambled dregs and stinkbug eggs and hornets stewed in tar, and pails of snails and lizards' tails and beetles by the jar. A beetle is improved by just a splash of vinegar. I often eat boiled slobbages. They're grand when served beside minced doodlebugs and scurry slugs. Have you ever tried mosquitoes' toes and wampfish roes and most delicately fried? The only trouble is that they disagree with my inside. I'm mad for crispy wasp stings on a piece of buttered toast and pickled spines of porcupines, and then a gorgeous roast of dragon's flesh, well hung, not fresh. It costs $1 at most and comes to you in barrels if you order it by post. I crave the tasty tentacles of octopi for tea. I like hot dogs. I love hot frogs, and surely you'll agree. A plate of soil with engine oils, a super recipe. I hardly need to mention that it's practically free. For dinner on my birthday, I shall tell you what I chose. hot noodles made from poodles on a slice of garden hose, and rather smelly jelly made of armadillo toes. The jelly is delicious, but you have to hold your nose. Now comes, the centipede declared, the